What if I told you that the world's wealthiest people are quietly moving their money not to New York, not to London, but to a country smaller than New York City, Singapore, while America struggles with debt and political gridlock? This tiny island has become the new safe haven for billionaires, investors, and global talent. Today, it has a higher GDP per person than the United States, one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, and a financial system so trusted that even Wall Street bankers are shifting east. The question isn't if Singapore can rival America, it's whether Singapore is already outsmarting it. America's wealth dominance. For the last 100 years, America has been the undisputed financial superpower. After World War II, the United States emerged as the world's economic engine. Through the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, the US dollar became the backbone of global trade. Oil, gold, and almost every major commodity were priced in dollars, giving Washington enormous leverage. If you wanted to trade internationally, you needed dollars, and that made America the center of global wealth. By the 1960s, the US produced nearly 40% of the world's GDP. Wall Street became the nerve center of capitalism. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Google turned Silicon Valley into a trillion-dollar innovation hub. For decades, the American dream wasn't just a story, it was an economic reality. But things are shifting. Today, America's share of the global economy has fallen to around 25%. The national debt has exploded past $34 trillion, which is now larger than the entire U.S. economy itself. To put it simply, America owes more than it produces in a year. Political gridlock in Washington makes reform nearly impossible. And every few months the world watches as Congress battles just to avoid defaulting on its own debt. Even trust in the U.S. dollar is slowly eroding. Central banks around the world are quietly diversifying, buying less American debt and holding more gold or alternative currencies. And while America still projects military and cultural power, investors and billionaires are asking a new question. Is the U.S. really the safest place for wealth anymore? This is exactly where Singapore steps into the story. Singapore's strategic advantage. Now let's turn to Singapore. On paper, this country should not be a success story. It's smaller than New York City, has no oil, no farmland, and no natural resources to rely on. Yet somehow Singapore has built itself into one of the most strategic and wealthy nations on earth. How? By turning its weakness into its greatest advantage. Innovation and talent power. For years, America's biggest advantage was simple: innovation. Silicon Valley became the birthplace of the modern tech world, from Apple and Google to Tesla and OpenAI. But while America still leads in raw innovation, Singapore is building something very different. A hyper-efficient ecosystem where technology, finance, and government are tightly linked. Take fintech. Singapore has become Asia's fintech capital, with over 1,000 startups operating in everything from digital banking to blockchain payments. Its government doesn't just regulate innovation, it actively funds and accelerates it through grants, test beds, and public-private partnerships. Compare that to the US, where startups often face red tape and uncertain rules. Then there's artificial intelligence and biotech. Singapore is investing billions into AI labs, data centers, and life sciences, positioning itself as a regional hub for future industries. Its universities, like the National University of Singapore, now rank among the world's top research institutions, punching far above their weight for a country of only 6 million people. But the real secret weapon is talent. While America is struggling with brain drain, polarized immigration debates, and rising costs in cities like San Francisco and New York, Singapore has quietly positioned itself as the preferred home for global professionals. Doctors from India, engineers from Europe, entrepreneurs from China, and even Western bankers are moving there. Why? Because Singapore offers high salaries, low taxes, personal safety, and a lifestyle that's stable and cosmopolitan. In other words, it's attracting the very people who drive growth in the modern economy. This combination innovation fueled by government support and global talent drawn by stability means Singapore is building a kind of Silicon Valley 2.0. Not one based on size, but on precision. And that's a model that could challenge America in ways Washington never expected. Singapore is not a military superpower. It doesn't have aircraft carriers or nuclear weapons, but it does have geography. And in geopolitics, location is everything. The country sits on the Strait of Malacca, a narrow waterway where nearly 40% of global trade passes each year. Oil, goods, electronics, much of it flows right past Singapore. This gives the nation influence far greater than its size. Both America and China know this. The US Navy uses Singapore as a base for its Pacific Fleet, while China relies on it as a trusted trade and finance partner. Singapore has done the impossible, keeping close ties with both rivals at the same time. Add to that one of Asia's most advanced militaries per capita, plus strong cyber defense, and Singapore becomes more than just a small state. It's a strategic power broker in one of the world's most contested regions. First location. Singapore sits right on the Strait of Malacca, a maritime choke point where nearly 40% of the world's shipping trade passes through every year. Oil from the Middle East, goods from China, electronics from Japan and South Korea, almost all of it flows past Singapore. Controlling this gateway has given the country outsized influence far beyond its size. If you want to do business in Asia, Singapore is often the entry point. Second, political stability. While America struggles with polarization and gridlock, Singapore is famous for its predictable, long-term policies. The government doesn't just think about the next election. Cycle it plans decades ahead. This stability makes investors comfortable because they know rules won't suddenly change overnight. Third, governance and efficiency. Singapore consistently ranks among the top in the world for ease of doing business. Contracts are enforced quickly, corruption is nearly non-existent, and infrastructure is world-class. Compare that to the US, where bureaucracy can drag projects out for years and where trust in government institutions has fallen sharply. Put all of this together, and you get a powerful formula. A tiny country that controls a vital trade route, offers political certainty, and delivers efficiency that global investors crave. It's no accident that money is flowing in from every direction. Singapore isn't just competing with its neighbors, it's quietly positioning itself against the United States as a safer, smarter financial hub, wealth magnet for the super rich. Here's where Singapore's rise becomes even more obvious. Over the last decade, it has quietly become the new Switzerland of Asia, the place where the world's richest people hide, grow, and protect their money. Take family offices, for example. These are private firms set up by ultra-wealthy families to manage their billions. In 2020, Singapore had just a few hundred of them. Today, there are more than 1,500, and the number is still climbing. To put it simply, billionaires from the United States, China, India, and the Middle East are shifting their fortunes out of unstable environments and into Singapore's stable, tax-friendly system. It's not just individuals. Global banks and hedge funds are expanding in Singapore too. Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, and Morgan Stanley are all building bigger offices there because that's where the money is moving. Even Wall Street insiders are beginning to treat Singapore as a safe backup hub in case US politics or debt problems spiral out of control. And the numbers are staggering. Assets under management in Singapore have exploded past $4 trillion, a figure growing far faster than in America or Europe. For a country this small, it's unprecedented. While the US prints debt, Singapore is quietly collecting the world's wealth and holding it in one of the most trusted financial systems on Earth. So where does this all lead? On one hand, America is still the world's largest economy and military power. Its influence in culture, technology, and global politics is unmatched. But the cracks are showing rising debt, political division, and declining trust. On the other hand, Singapore is lean, efficient, and trusted. It doesn't need to be bigger than the US to matter. By concentrating global wealth, talent, and influence, it's creating a new kind of power. One based not on size, but on precision. In the future, America may remain the global superpower in terms of military strength, but Singapore could become the world's ultimate financial safe haven, the place where the rich, the powerful, and the ambitious go to protect their future. And in a century where money often moves faster than armies, that kind of leverage could prove just as powerful as military might. Conclusion. So can Singapore really overtake America? In raw size, no. The United States will remain larger, louder, and more dominant in many areas. But in wealth concentration, global trust, and financial influence, Singapore may already be pulling ahead. This tiny nation has shown that power doesn't always belong to the biggest country. Sometimes it belongs to the smartest one, and maybe that's the real lesson here. In the 21st century, global dominance won't be defined by land, population, or even armies, but by who controls the flow of money and trust. On that front, Singapore is already playing a game America never expected.